When I started painting, I was just painting whatever I could, whatever ideas popped into my head, but by the time I got to school, I was in college, and I was thinking, well, how do you know what's good? How do you know what's good art? And Poe's tapped into something there. And great art is something like that that really changes the world around you. Well, there was never a time that I wasn't making stuff. I always wanted to build stuff, make stuff, draw things, paint things. And one of my earliest memories is making a museum. We went to the Smithsonian Natural History Museum and saw those great fossils, and I decided I need to make my own museum. So on an old magnolia tree, I put together some old rotten boards and sticks and twigs and made dinosaur fossils. At least I thought they were dinosaur fossils, and that became my first museum. And then this punk kid came along and he tore it all up. And he was so proud he destroyed my museum, so I rebuilt the whole thing with the addition of a single string hanging down in the middle. So as soon as he pulled it down, cat turds fell all over him and all sorts of pine needles and sharp stuff. And so that was my first museum security system. So ever since then, I've been interested in museums and artwork and creating things. My first experience with Poe would have to be 5th grade, and our librarian exposed us to the comedies. So I vividly remembered she started out with "Never Bet the Devil Your Head," a tale with a moral, and it's this funny story about a guy called Toby, and it's one of Poe's stories that actually has profanity in it, so we loved that the kid's name was Toby Dammit. And it's sort of a folksy tale that reads like something Mark Twain would have written decades later. And at the end, the guy gets his head chopped off and there's blood. It's just great. Kids love that stuff. I probably started painting around middle school. In class, we would do some tempera paintings, and my brother decided he wanted to do some painting, and then he gave it up pretty quickly and left all these tubes of acrylic paint, so I just started painting pictures from there. But I'd been drawing up until that point, so it was just a natural extension of that. And I try to think back, well, what's art that's really impressed me? What's art that's stuck with me years later? And it took me right back to the Telltale Heart. How did Poe change the whole atmosphere of a bedroom, of our bedroom, with that story? And when Poe finally did get it published, he only got paid $10 for it. But that's the one everybody's read now. Although we read this thing in 7th grade, we have kids reading this in school. In Poe's day, the first time he tried to have the Telltale Heart published, he got rejected. The magazine said they'd be glad to take something a little bit quieter, maybe a little less chopping up corpses and that sort of thing. That's something you kind of miss when you're reading it from a 21st century perspective. And I did a whole series of paintings that weren't really illustrations to the Telltale Heart, but were inspired by that scene, by that anticipation. And it was perfect for me because I realized painting is still. It doesn't move. Now I could try to make it something other than it is, but how do you make a painting like that? I thought, well, a painting's still, it's silent, but what you can really do is you can try to suggest, rather than just depicting the murder, rather than just depicting action. How about suggest the possibilities? That's what I want to try to do with my paintings. I want to try to suggest something beyond what we see. Poe looked a lot to the news. He was in the magazine business after all. That's where his stories were being published, and very often his stories were published in the same periodicals that were publishing these true life stories of murder and mayhem. Poe's other stories, he does reference popular culture of the day. He references politicians of his time, other writers, the transcendentalists, and how they didn't like him, he didn't like them. He thought they were just being weird for the sake of being weird. They thought his stories were immoral because Poe didn't care about having a moral for his story. He didn't care about teaching you a lesson. He said a story should impact your emotions. That's how you know it's good or not. Not by the moral lesson, not by something outside the story, but by the story itself. I think that's the most important thing art can do, is it could just inspire the imagination. And I'd love it if, people who saw my art could be inspired maybe to produce something else, or even just a painting that can change the way you see the world around you. That's the great thing that art can do.